We have spent £250,000 for Boris Johnson to admit to everybody he's too stupid to know what his own rules even mean. That's the only defense that he has here. Interesting that you should ask, right, about what's happening with Boris Johnson is that he has released a document talking about how he accepts that he misled Parliament, right? So let's be real, right? Okay, he spent £250,000 of taxpayers' money on legal advice on how to draft this document to try and prove his innocence, and the very first thing is accepting that he misled Parliament, but that he didn't do it intentionally. So he really is trying to cover his ass here rather than actually properly, refute any of the claims, because he's accepting he's misleading Parliament from the first place. So let me just bring this up on screen for you all. The former Prime Minister has published a 50-page defence of his actions ahead of grilling by MPs tomorrow. He says his assurances to MPs that lockdown rules had been followed were made in good faith. He faces being suspended, etc., etc. We've gone through all of this already. So the evidence they already have strongly suggests COVID rule breaking in Downing Street would have been obvious to the then Prime Minister. In his defence document, prepared by his taxpayer-funded legal team, headed by top barrister Lord Panic Casey, Mr. Johnson says he had not intentionally or recklessly misled MPs and would never have dreamed of doing so. And that's just such bullshit. It's just such bullshit. It's literally O.J. Simpson. He's guilty as fuck. If I partied my way through lockdowns. Again, this is the man who just continually lied over and over and over again. This man is just his entire career is based fundamentally on the fact that he got there through dishonesty, and him trying to claim he didn't intentionally do it and would never have dreamed of doing so. It just no. Who the hell's believing this? Who on earth believes this shit? Who could possibly believe what he's saying here? But that's true. The Tories are genuinely, especially Boris Johnson's new sect of the Tories, genuinely believe that they have the power to be able to say something didn't happen and make it not happen. They think they're the changeling from Pathologic, that they can just blame something on a mythical twin sister that doesn't exist, and it'll just appear out of nowhere. Right, Donny Marco, how you doing? Because that's what they did with proroguing Parliament when it was found to be unlawful. They said, we disagree with the Supreme Court's ruling. No, you don't get to decide that. They're the people who decide how the laws are interpreted. You can't just disagree with their interpretation when they're the ones who get to decide and not you. You can't just disagree with that stuff. And not to mention the fact that Rishi Sunak, who also misled Parliament, is currently the fucking Prime Minister, who got fined for the same partygate shit. He's accepted assurances he gave the Commons on several occasions after the partygate scandal emerged in 2021 that rules had been followed had turned out to be wrong. But he believed at the time that events he attended in Number 10, including the bid farewell to departing
neoliberalism.
Staff. Hey, with the gifted sub to Donny Marco, thank you, Tyrannax, much appreciated. Including to bid farewell to departing staff, abided by restrictions because they were essential for work purposes. So I think they're going down the line of saying that they think that because it was in a work environment, because they were where they worked, you could fundamentally say that, well, we were just having drinks whilst technically there was some kind of work going on. So it's essentially the Keir Starmer defense. Really. Positively Trumpian is Shaggy, it wasn't me, Johnson. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely doing his best Shaggy impression right now. Like a guilty child, with a face smeared with brown chocolate sauce, being asked, have you been eating from the cookie jar? And they go, that's literally what he is. And we know already that he is a child. He absolutely is. Just the way he phrases sentences, the way he talks to people, the view he has of himself and the kind of things that he does. He just is a child. He just has the brain of a small child. Currygate to Electric Vindaloo. Amazing. Amazing. He added that it remains unclear to him why he was fined for attending a gathering in Number 10. So he's disputing the fact that he should have been fined in the first place. That's interesting. He said he relied on officials to advise him about other events in the building that he did not attend, and there was nothing unreasonable about that. The committee is expected to publish its verdict on Mr. Johnson by the summer. Blah, blah, blah. Interim report published earlier this month. The committee said Mr. Johnson's statements to MPs, as well as his performance at the COVID press conferences, showed that he understood what the rules were. In a statement on Tuesday, the committee said Mr. Johnson's written submission contained no new documentary evidence. That's £250,000 of public money well spent by Mr. Johnson there. Excellent work. Love it. Love to see the public's money being used in non-frivolous manners. Love to see that. Love to see it. Imagine spending £250,000 to essentially say, even though I made the rules, and people told me I was seeking advice on whether the rules should be followed or not, I am unfortunately too stupid to follow the own rules that I created. That's, you spent £250,000 of public money to essentially put forward an entire 50-page document to the public, and the only thing that you have to say is, I was too dumb to understand what the rules were. Literally, I'm so stupid that only do I not understand what the rules were, I don't understand the rules that I myself fucking wrote, because I was the Prime Minister at the time. It's so pathetic. It's genuinely pathetic. But funny, though. It's funny. And there's a video to watch about this from Sky News. We're going to watch that. And then we're going to watch Sangeeta Miska debate somebody saying that it's a stitch-up. So that should be interesting. That should be good fun.
In the last few moments, we have the evidence that Boris Johnson has submitted to the Privileges Committee inquiry. This is the inquiry looking into his behaviour at Number 10 and whether or not he misled the Houses of Parliament. The submission...
How the hell do they justify that cost? Because if you're part of the government, you get to spend the money on anything, and no matter how frivolous it is, right? Like, whether it's contracts to your mates, whether it's flights to Rwanda. At one time, I think Liz Truss took a private plane to Australia when she was Prime Minister, for example, when she's trying to do trade deals and shit like that, right? Loads of money to keep these people in the lap of luxury, that's fine. That's a reasonable use of public funds, right? Universal free school meals? No. Pay rise for nurses? No. None of that shit's allowed. None of that. Public sector pay freezes forever. Public sector investment freezes forever. But loads of spare money to go swanning off in private jets. Too dumb to follow distancing rules, but should still lead the country, though. Well, yeah, it's unreal, isn't it? Oh, the editor of Conservative Home is the person we're going to be reacting to, Mithril. It's going to be fun. It's like the comedic excuses you read about on insurance claims. Or the people who end up, walking into A&E with a glass bottle shoved up their ass, and they're like, yeah, I just fell onto it. No, we all know. We all know.
Basically give an outline to what happened, how the revelations in Sue Gray's report shocked the public. He also then says that he accepts that the House of Commons was misled by my statements. We know that already, that he has accepted that he did mislead the House. The nub of what this report is about is whether or not he intentionally misled the House, or whether he was speaking in good faith, and whether or not he believed that he was actually telling the truth. He says...
Worth noting, Donny Marco, the RMT deal is just for National Rail employees. It's not for the train operating companies.
They were made in good faith when he made them to the House. He accepts that the House of Commons were misled, but that they were in good faith, as I've just said. Let's bring in...
How can you mislead somebody in good faith? I don't know how that's even possible, to mislead somebody in good faith.
Correspondent Ali Fortescue, who joins us now. Ali, you've only just had a few seconds to glance at this, but what leaps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, look, this was a scandal that brought down a Prime Minister with an 80-seat majority, and the Privileges Committee already in an interim report said that it must have been, they suggest, obvious to the former PM that COVID rule breaches did happen. So this is a big moment. This is Boris Johnson's defence for what happens. And And we're just sort of reading it really for the first time now, but in the fourth paragraph on the second page, he says, I accept that the House of Commons was misled by my statements, that the rules and guidance had been followed completely at number 10, but when the statements were made, they were made in good faith and on the basis of what I honestly knew and believed at the time. I did not intentionally or recklessly mislead the House on the 1st of December.
So yeah, actually, yeah, so that's how you can mislead in good faith, if you genuinely believe something that's wrong and then share that information unreliably. So that does make sense as a theoretical defense, except it would only make sense as a defense if you didn't write the rules, so you should know exactly what they entail. Again, I would like to repeat this one more time. We have spent £250,000 for Boris Johnson to admit to everybody he's too stupid to know what his own rules even mean. That's the only defense that he has here. If he doesn't understand the rules, then that's the only possible conclusion that you can come from this.
2021, 8th of December 2021, or on any other date. I would never have dreamed of doing so. So this is obviously him saying that he did not recklessly, this is what the Privileges Committee are looking at, did he recklessly mislead the House when he said no rules were broken? His allies have really focused on two things. Firstly, that he was acting on the advice of officials. He didn't know that these rules were being broken. Secondly, questions about the Privileges Committee process itself. I was speaking to one Boris Johnson ally yesterday who said that this was a Labour-led committee. Of course, Harriet Harman, who chairs the committee, also questions about the Sue Gray report, which, as we know, looked into the partygate scandal. We know that Sue Gray has been talking to the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, about working for him. So his allies are shining a light on that. But as I say, the interim report has already said that COVID rule breaches must have been obvious to the former Prime Minister. Boris Johnson will give 4 hours of evidence to the committee tomorrow.
Oh boy, we're going to react, Andy, to that. It's going to be so much fun. Do we know what time it is tomorrow? So I will definitely be covering that shit live. Engagement. Think of the engagement. Live coverage of the Boris Johnson hearings. Although we're competing with like The Guardian and The Indie and The Telegraph and everyone else who's going to be covering it on theirs. But I'm going to be special because I'm going to be react-andying to it live. I mean, literally, yeah, like you could just you could literally have bought a house for that money. Literally, someone could have got a free house, but no, Boris Johnson needed to tell the entire public that he's an idiot. He's very, very dumb. To be fair, not that we needed explaining to us that Boris Johnson was very, very dumb, because we all knew that. But for him to have it literally in like written as a legal document, I am a dumb fuck. It's you can't pay for that, you know. You can't pay for that kind of stuff. Around 2 o'clock, perfect. Exactly when I was going to stream. Love it.
That is going to be a blockbuster moment. His political career hangs in the balance. And as you say, we have just in the last few moments had this...
Think of that statement, right? Think of what was just been said there, right? Boris Johnson's political career hangs in the balance. This was a man who knowingly promoted a multiple time known sex pest to a very high position in the Conservative Party, and we're still trying to say, oh, maybe Boris Johnson his political career hangs based upon the response to the Partygate, and I'm like, why is his career not ended already? Why did it not end when we found out that he conspired to have a journalist beaten up? Why are we continually talking about Partygate as if that's the be-all and end-all of the crimes of Boris Johnson? As if the racism and the homophobia and the classism, that was all just kind of horseplay. And then the Chris Pincher stuff and the conspiring to beat up journalists stuff, that was just, hijinks. The real clincher here is the fact that he had a beer and cake when he shouldn't have done. Which, to be fair, is not good. It's bad. I'm not saying that it's not bad. It is. But is it worse than promoting a sex pest? No. Is it worse than being an open homophobe and racist? No. Is it worse than conspiring to have a journalist beaten up? No, of course it isn't. It's ironic that Johnson was brought down by a sex scandal that he didn't cause. Well, yeah, true. Partygate pricks the sense of public hypocrisy. That's often seen as the worst thing. That is true. I mean, I do think we put too much emphasis on people being bad for being hypocrites, because that's basically entirely a lot of the reason why people vote Conservative, is because they see Labour Party as being hypocrites. They see Labour Party being, well, you're a bunch of rich people, right? You're a bunch of rich MPs trying to tell me that you have the best interests of the poor at heart, when, you know, that's not who you are. You're doing things against your own interests. And they fundamentally think that is hypocritical, and they distrust it. And I don't really properly care myself about hypocrisy. I'm a utilitarian. I care about the consequences of people's action. Although I do think that hypocrisy does sting a lot. It does sting. And it's a very kind of visceral. It's a visceral thing that people really, really dislike. It's why conservatives, because a lot of conservative morality is built basically on emotion. That's why conservatives' first thing that they'll criticize for you is a sense of hypocrisy. Like Jeremy Corbyn did an interview on politicsjoe, saying about how he hates how many private school kids there are in Parliament, how the discussions are around, you know, private school hijinks rather than the things that they can do for the country. And then the quote tweet is just like, "Oh, didn't you go for private school for a little bit?" And it's like, yeah, well, you know, he's being a class traitor here. Like, fundamentally, staying within your class interests is what conservatives believe should happen all the time. And the biggest hypocrisy, as far as a conservative is concerned, is being a member of, you know, a higher class and sympathising with people below you, because they believe in a just world. They believe in the noble lie, so much so that they believe that, you know, people who are in their positions must therefore be in their positions justly rather than unjustly. If there's one thing that Brits can't stand, it's not being invited to a party. Definitely boomers and Gen Xers. With millennials, it's a relief when you don't get invited to the party, or when the party gets cancelled, because then you don't have to make firm plans, you don't have to deal with seeing other people. Paul Corbyn only went to a school which later became a private school. I think he got a scholarship, didn't he? I'm not sure. I think he was at private school for some amount of time. Whether or not he went there originally, whether it was originally a private school and he went there, whether it changed, or I don't know. But there was a non-zero amount of time where he was at a school that was a private school. Shoot me in my DMs, Donny Marco. I'll cover it later. All I see is Labour sucking up to Tory voters, and when you have the audacity to point this out, they accuse you of wanting a Tory government in power and to beat you out. I mean, yeah, that's true. That does happen a lot. Aid Thompson's latest video, I'll have to check that out too.
Long dossier, I think it's about 50 or 60 pages long. Boris Johnson setting out his version of events and why he thinks he did not recklessly mislead the House.
And Ali, obviously I've been hanging on your every word, but at the same time, I've been trying to sort of speed read through this document as we have it in front of me. I'm up to page 29. The House of Commons Committee has said that this written submission contains no new documentary evidence. And that's key, isn't it? Because we were perhaps expecting there to be something like text messages or any sort of written guidance that Mr. Johnson had been given to assure him that what he was doing was within the bounds of law. And that does not appear to be contained in this document. There are lots and lots of phrases of Mr. Johnson talking through it. I did not recall a conversation. I do not remember that. So he's appearing to go through each individual allegation that's been made against him and setting out his reasoning and his understandings of that point. But it doesn't appear that this does include any new written information. We've also had a little bit of guidance.
Yeah, literally, again, if it doesn't include any new information, then all that's happened here is he's admitted publicly in a legal document that he's a moron. Like, that's all it is. That's literally all it is. Yeah, why bother reading it? There's no point. Let's move on then. Let's move on to this debate between the journalist, the head editor, is it, for Conservative Home, and Sangeeta Miska on LBC. This should be funny. This should be a fun one.
Do you believe that Boris Johnson
Conservative Post rather than Conservative Home.
misled Parliament, Claire?
Good afternoon, Sangeeta. Well, just listening to you before, I can tell you do, but I certainly don't.
That lasted well. Oh, fucking hell, that is that went well, didn't it? Literally the day before This was filmed yesterday, right, or was released on LBC yesterday. This journalist here saying, no, 100%, I do not believe he misled Parliament whatsoever. I 100% he didn't mislead Parliament. The very next day, Boris Johnson, yes, I misled Parliament, just not intentionally. literally, she's been disproved by the person that she is defending the next day. Oh, that these things that aged poorly. This interview.
Really do think this whole process lacks credibility. Whichever way you look at it, it's scandalous and it's a slur on our democracy. I've been through the evidence, with a fine-tooth comb over the last few weeks, and I'm just appalled, actually. I really am, that it's actually got to this stage. So, yes, that's why we have been emailing, or getting our members to email the MPs, the Conservative MPs, saying, pull out. We don't want you to be any part of this.
Okay,
It's a
I'm going to come to that in a minute. Can I
campaign.
just come back for a second?
So, and again, even then, right? Even if it's an affront to the democracy, right? If it's genuinely an affront to democracy, then surely that will mean that when it comes to if it does go to a recall petition, the recall petition will fail. The democratic will of the people will mean, oh, we don't want a recall petition, or he'll get re-elected in his constituency, right? If you genuinely this is all an affront to democracy, then the people will surely disagree with you. Or surely agree with you, rather, sorry. Will agree or disagree with what the government have found, and will duly not want to go to a recall in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, or they will re-elect him in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. Like clearly, like this is if that does happen, then it is the democratic will of the people to get rid of this guy. The elected members want to think that it should go to a recall petition. The recall petition then gets signed, and then the people vote him out. Welcome to democracy, Claire. That's how democracy works. People vote on this shit.
Certainly very strong language there. You described the Privileges Committee as a slur on democracy. I would think that they would be quite outraged by that, Claire.
I don't actually care if they're outraged. It really, truly is. I mean,
How can it be a slur on democracy when this is part of our parliamentary process?
Well, when Parliament were asked to vote on this,
How can I just say, I know this is going to sound really mean-spirited, but this woman literally is like an AI-generated image of a conservative woman. Am I wrong, or am I right here? That is literally just an AI. You just popped a generic white conservative woman into an AI, and this is the kind of image that it would bring up to me. Clearly, someone who can afford a good dentist, because my God, those pearly whites are blinding.
they didn't actually have all the facts. We know the Sue Gray report has been discredited. We know her advising barrister of that report has been discredited. They've also massively changed the...
Have they been discredited? When did that happen? I did not hear anything about her being discredited. Her as a civil servant's been discredited for wanting to jump ship and work for Sir Keith Starmer Casey, right? Maybe she as a person has been discredited as a civil servant. The actual report itself hasn't been discredited at all, has it?
goalposts. I mean, for one, let me just give you one example. Intent. Everyone was told it was all about Boris's intent. Who defines that? What is the intent? What is the intent? Anyone who's even got a basic knowledge of law, everyone who's seen, Blonde Ambition or something, mens rea, you've got to have intent for a crime to be committed. But they've actually changed the goalpost now. And they've said, has he been recklessly misleading? I mean, how on earth they've managed to get away with that? I mean, that's just ridiculous. Also, you've got to look at the actual context of...
Although, of course, sorry, you've just drawn the parallel with law. And, of course, in law, let me take an extreme example.
Yeah, I don't think mens rea applies to parliamentary procedure. Anyway. You're right, Dan, how you doing? This person has dog shit where their brain should be. I'm hopefully Sangeeta will be able to, enlighten us on how dog shit this person is. But Sure, I mean, the issue is that, we don't believe that he didn't know that he was breaking the rules. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make there is no possible situation where he could have not known that he was breaking the rules. It's simple. It's so simple. This is like she does look like a British Ann Coulter, doesn't she? 100%. Yeah, I'm definitely getting some Ann Coulter vibes here. Although she's less skeletal than Ann Coulter. Like Ann Coulter is basically skin and bone at this point. If you don't know the law, it still applies to you. Well, yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly.
Manslaughter, if you're convicted of manslaughter, then that is because you have behaved recklessly. In other words, you may not have had intent, but your behaviour was predictably going to end up in the death of someone. So actually, what you seem to be questioning, Claire, and this is, I've got to be honest, I'm quite taken aback. What you seem to be suggesting is that due process established through our parliamentary systems that has been used time and time and time again, that has never been questioned before, you're describing that as a slur on democracy.
Well,
and you're
I'm
now
sorry.
actually going a step further and suggesting that it should be sabotaged by campaigning, as I understand it, for the 4 Tory MPs that sit on the Privileges Committee to withdraw.
Well, I'm sorry, but with your reasoning, why is the Parliament even looking into this when a higher authority fined Boris for people walking into his office and singing happy birthday to him? He wasn't.
Is the police force a higher authority than the government? The government control the police force. The police force act under the remit that's given to them by the government. Surely the police handing out the fine aren't higher than that. So we know that the rules were broken. The discussion is of whether or not Boris Johnson could claim whether he knew whether they were being broken or not. So again, the literal only defense possible of all of this is just that Boris Johnson's a moron. It's the only defense that you have. Like, not just a moron, like a special kind of moron, like more moronic than one could possibly be, and then also having enough competence to be the Prime Minister of the country, or even be a member of Parliament, quite frankly. That's the only defense that they have. He's too stupid to know what the rules are.
Fined for attending any parties. That, read the facts of that case, and that is a higher authority in the good law of our lands and the way things should be done.
So hang on, are you suggesting that professions, which is let's call being an MP a profession, are you suggesting that employers should never have any internal disciplinary processes? Because that's essentially what this is. So by your reasoning, Claire, no employer in the country, in the world, would ever have an internal disciplinary procedure.
I'm not saying that. I've said
that is what you're saying. You're saying he's already been fined, and therefore there's no reason to have a parliamentary inquiry.
I'm saying if you were an employer in the land, you should go with what the police have said, and the police fined him.
Wait, literally, fucking tractor porn guy. Like, tractor porn guy quit of his own volition after doing something way, way, way less bad than the perceived problem with Partygate, right? Watching porn in Parliament is poor form, I'm not going to lie. Is it worse than breaking the rules that you set out whilst, people on the front lines were dying in trying to administer medical care to people during a pandemic? Like, so many MPs have quit for way, way less than what this was. I bet she posted a meme that told Facebook she doesn't agree with the terms of service and thought that gets her out of it. Well, yeah, exactly. Or the people who will violate copyright by uploading other people's things to YouTube. And in the description box, they'll say, this is the property of such and such and such and such a thing, so I will be able to monetize this, right? That's genuinely what these people feel like to me. The defence that may work for Boris is exactly the thing Boris is most well known for being, cavalier and uninterested in detail. So unless they have absolute proof that he knew it was against the rules before he addressed the House, he'll get away with it because Boris is Boris. I think that Boris Johnson's personal image in Parliament is so tarnished now that I don't think he'll get away with it, because I think the MPs don't want him to be there, right? I think the MPs will want to get rid of him because they think that he tarnishes the position that they hold, because quite frankly that he does. But I understand where you're coming from in the, depending on the people that are on the Privileges Committee, he may just be able to bluster his way through it, considering, you're absolutely 100% correct that he is completely cavalier and uninterested in detail. There's a great, actually fantastic ways of specifically describing the kind of wavelength that he operates on. But I do think that there's going to be a desire for the Privileges Committee to want to properly mete out real criticism because of the criticisms that they get as being sitting MPs themselves. Claire brings expertise in key areas of marketing and communications, including media relations, online PR, publicity stunts, press releases, broadcast consultancy, brand management, celebrity endorsement, media training, event planning, and personal PR. Source from her LinkedIn. But she sounds like a wonderful human being who I definitely don't want to never spend any time in the same room as ever.
For a gathering of people walking into his office during the workday. It was a Thursday or Friday afternoon, in between meetings, in his place of work. They were all, employees working during the pandemic, in exactly the same way as hospital staff were gathering. I was working in my newspaper
Hospital
office at the
staff
time.
were not having drinks and having parties and puking up on walls and breaking children's swings. And I think, honestly, Claire.
And also, we know already as well from the information that we've seen from people like Allegra Stratton, or from the Sucre report too, that the culture of having parties in the number 10 was widespread. For example, these were happening all the time. There were continual parties going. People broke the regulations on numerous occasions. And the idea that Boris Johnson, because we only have the photograph of Boris Johnson at one of these, the idea that he wasn't just at a bunch of them, I find that really difficult to believe. Obviously, there's no proof. So this can't be used in the Privileges Committee. But, the culture of number 10 parties was massively exposed by the reporting that happened in the wake of Partygate scandal.
Nurses and paramedics and doctors listening to you now will be deeply offended by that parallel.
Well, this is another thing. The Sucre report at the time wasn't talking about the leadership of Boris. If you check all the dates, Boris wasn't in Downing Street for most of that time. Simon Case, she was talking about Simon Case, the cabinet secretary. He was responsible for the civil servants. And I heard you on the programme before just constantly saying politicians breaking the rule.
No, I didn't say politicians breaking rules. I said I reported what has been widely reported to be fact, which is that he was fined along with Rishi Sunak for attending a birthday party. It was a fixed penalty notice that was handed out to him. And I think that that's the case, don't you? Because if you're suggesting that isn't true, then I'm sorry, I'm absolutely baffled.
I wrote about it at the time. I actually thought the police should hand him back his fine. He didn't break the rules. As far as things go, it was a place of work. He was.
The police know more about this than you do, Claire. Like, I hate to give credence to the police narrative on this one, considering the title of the stream right now. But I think the people who are there to enforce the laws probably know more about enforcing them than some fucking middle-aged journo turd who writes shitty op-eds for conservative. She's not even op-eds. She's the editor of Conservative Post, right? Who edits shitty magazines. Like, I really think they know more about this than you do. Must have been Labour's master plan to set him up on his birthday.
An employee working during the pandemic, and it was in between business meetings, and it wasn't a party, as you've said in this programme, and other people.
What was it then? What was he actually fined for?
He was fined for people walking.
What, just standing around? Was he for doing his job?
Look at the photos.
For walking in between meetings.
If you think that was a party, you need a bit more of a life, I'm afraid. Look at the actual photos. Also, another.
Have you said that to the Metropolitan Police, Claire? Have you said to them, you know what? You know what? Cressida Dick, Mark Rowley, what you need is more of a life rather than conducting a police investigation.
Because my problem with the police, which we'll get onto later, is obviously the homophobia, the misogyny, the bullying, the old boy kind of lads culture of it. If there's anything that they would not do is gratuitously give out fines to members of the the actual establishment of the country. If there's one thing that I will trust the police on, is that when they're fining members of the establishment, they have 1000% evidence to make sure that they're doing it correctly. Because otherwise, why these people already cucked the establishment? Yeah, there has to be an incredibly special case for the police to act against their own interests, which is protecting power, which is what the police is specifically there for. So in this one instance, I'm very happy to go with the police narrative on this one, because they have no reason, they have no incentive to go against Boris Johnson for any of this. I think cops definitely don't know much of the law when they're out on the beat for a lot of the time. But when it's a massive internal investigation on an incredibly prominent individual, sorry, like Boris Johnson, there's so many people that it's got to go through to get to that point for the police investigation to be able to issue the fine in the first place, right? Whereas if it was a random shitter, they can just get away with whatever. But if it's someone like Boris Johnson, there's so many things and loopholes and hoops they have to jump through to be able to get to that point in the first place, whilst also having to go against their fundamental material interest, which is protecting the powerful.
Into the Prime Minister of this country, breaking his own rules. Have you tried that one with them?
Oh, well, I did write about it at the time, and I basically said just that. But another area is...
Hang on a minute. Can I just go back to the really key thing here? You're campaigning, if I understand this correctly, to get Andy Carter, Alberto Costa, Sir Charles Walker and Sir Bernard Jenkin, all Tory MPs sitting on the Privileges Committee, to withdraw. Is that right?
Yeah, we believe that this investigation is nothing but a politically motivated...
Isn't that anti-democratic, Claire?
No, it's totally. They shouldn't be sitting on this kangaroo court. It's ridiculous.
Well, they should be sitting on it because it is a cross... Hang on a minute. It's a cross...
Yeah, like, they should withdraw from it because they make up the majority of the panel and have a fundamental new interest in protecting Boris Johnson as well as Conservative MPs. Like, if it's a political hit job, why is the panel, the majority of the panel, it's Conservative MPs? Was it, I think it's five, is it four or five Tory MPs and then 3 Labour, 1 Lib Dem? I think it is. Something like that, or 1 SNP. That doesn't make any sense. She's making no sense whatsoever. Why would you want to get... 421, thank you. Why does she want to get rid of the people who are politically partisan in favour of her position here? This woman's defence of a deeply mendacious individual is unreal but entirely expected, because the Conservatives believe that they are the chosen people. They believe that the echelon of the population that they live in is and should continue to be untouchable, and they absolutely hate the idea the people within the bubble that they sit in should be subject to any scrutiny whatsoever. Again, as JDM points out in chat every single time, they fundamentally believe that the law exists for one group of people that the law protects but does not bind, and another group of people for which the law binds but does not protect. That's fundamental to the Conservative worldview, and fundamental in the way that they view law enforcement. Like, look in the way in which, the people in January 6th were very surprised when they saw themselves getting arrested by police officers, because they fundamentally believe, correctly, that the police are on their side 99% of the time. Just, there was that one occasion where they went too far. They went too far, so even the corrupt feds could not justify being on their side anymore. And that's what happens when you have de facto privilege given to you by your position in relation to the police, is that eventually you'll go too far because you believe that you're untouchable. I'm just lucky that in the UK, the too far became having drinks in number 10 and wasn't storming the fucking Capitol. You all right, Bilderberg, how you doing?
It's a crossbench committee, right? And the reason it is a crossbench committee, and there are 4 Tories on it, so that's the majority of 7. The reason it's crossbench is because we trust our MPs to be able to do the right thing in this process, and that is to lift themselves out of party politics, look at the evidence, and come to a conclusion as to whether or not Boris Johnson knowingly or unknowingly misled Parliament. Are you suggesting these 4 Tory MPs cannot do that?
Well, the greatest lawyer in the land, Lord Panic, who is a global superstar in law, he's ruled.
Yeah, and Lord Panic could literally, the only defence that he could muster for Boris Johnson was this man is a moron. Literally, the only defence that they had was that Boris Johnson was too stupid to understand the rules. That's the only defence they have. The best legal mind in the world, according to Claire over here. The only defence they could find was Boris Johnson's too stupid to govern. That was the only defence they could find. We now know that. We have categorical evidence because they published their defence.
That it's absolutely shouldn't be happening.
He's being paid for by Boris Johnson to defend him.
Well,
and me and you are paying that, and so are all of the taxpayers of this country.
Well, in exactly the same breath then, why isn't Rishi being held to the same account? I mean...
Hang on, just answer the question.
I mean, true. I mean, worst person you know just made a great point. Why is Rishi not being held to similar standards? Why is Rishi Sunak able to swan around, inflicting austerity on all of us, when he is guilty of all of the same things that Boris Johnson is? Right? Unfortunately, she thinks that neither of them should be held accountable, or both of them should be held accountable. Absolutely, both should be held accountable. I swear Rishi Sunak did lie to Parliament in basically the same way that Boris Johnson did. Right? Am I misremembering here? I might be misremembering. I've got a shitty memory. I mean, I'm a fucking moron is literally the panic defense. I mean, it's very true.
Let's answer the question. Is it not fundamentally anti-democratic that you are asking 4 Tory MPs to withdraw from the Privileges Committee that is investigating Boris Johnson?
I don't think that's anti-democratic at all. I think it's anti-democratic when
we elect MPs via a general election to represent our interests, which is what Andy Carter, Alberto Costa, Charles Walker and Bernard Jenkins are doing. Right? Do you agree that they were elected by Tory voters to sit in Parliament, and part of their duties is to sit on this Privileges Committee and to do the right thing?
When Parliament voted for this Privileges Committee, they didn't know all the facts. I've already just been through this.
But they can sit through the evidence, Claire. That's the whole point.
This is it. Let's wait to see what the evidence is on Wednesday.
So then why are you trying to...
I said that the greatest legal mind in the world apparently started off his career by failing to get somebody out of being hanged. Yeah, great. A good track record this Lord Panic has. Rishi stayed out of the media at the time and shut up in the Houses of Parliament. Okay, fair enough. If he's not lied to, if Rishi didn't mislead the House in the same way, then it is different between the two. I stand corrected," said the man in the orthopaedic shoes.
Undermine and subvert it by asking them to pull out.
Well, we do know that they've seen a lot of the evidence behind the scenes. They know what's going on.
It looks terrible for Boris Johnson, doesn't it?
They know that at the time when they were asked to sit on this privilege.
Yes, Bilderberg. We're watching this interview from yesterday, having now had the documents released showing that Johnson admitted that he misled the House. So it's incredibly funny for this Claire person to be talking up the idea that Boris Johnson's going to be automatically acquitted because he didn't break any of the rules and didn't mislead Parliament, for him to now have released his 50-page legal document specifically claiming that he accepts that he misled Parliament. So yeah, Egg and Claire's face are definitely in alignment now.
Committee, they weren't in receipt of all the evidence then. So that is, literally, it is just a kangaroo court. Do you want to have our country being ruled by these sort of things? It's
Claire, this is not a kangaroo court. This is a set of MPs who have been democratically elected to sit on a cross-party committee to examine the evidence that will be before them, and they will then reach a conclusion.
Well, also,
she thinks she's acting like that they're definitely going to recommend a suspension of more than 10 days. They may only recommend a suspension of 5 days, in which case it won't go to a recall petition.
You have gone through and done as much research as I have, you will have gone through all the Hansard records. You would have looked at every single little bit of, speech that was said in the Houses of Parliament. Boris was asked specific questions about specific dates.
And he kept changing his story.
I mean, the fact that she's saying Pacific rather than specific means that I automatically think that she's wrong. I know that makes me a bad person to do and say that, but I don't care. I'm sorry. I'm going to put my foot down on pronouncing the word specific correctly. He accepts that the Parliament was misled, but not that he knowingly misled Parliament. Yeah, he said that he did it, but he unintentionally misled Parliament is what his defence is. Yeah, and by unintentionally, the only conclusion you can draw from this was he was too stupid to understand what the regulations were. And she's the one calling herself an editor. I wonder if the police have some juicy stuff on Sunak already because of lockdown parties. Wouldn't be surprised if something comes out. I mean, there's so much. There's huge amounts of stuff that the police, that the lawyers have access to, the media almost certainly has access to, that none of us fucking know. That's all kept hush hush, right? Like as I've said when I did a TikTok about it before, how Allegra Stratton was one of the people who had to resign because she was caught joking about having the lockdown parties at the time in Number 10, like as Downing Street press secretary. She was married to James Forsyth, editor of The Spectator and columnist for The Telegraph. So he, as a media figure, would have known at the time that these parties were happening because he was fucking banging the Downing Street press secretary at the time. They would have known these things were happening, yet they didn't report on it. Why? Why did they not report on it? And there you go. That's all you need to know. All you need to know.
Absolutely. That is a slur from you.
No, it's not a slur from me. I watched it. I saw it. First he said that he was not aware of any parties. Then he said he'd be outraged if there were some parties. Then it turned out that he'd just been fined by the Met, in fact, and he was at one of these parties. And then he went on to say absolutely he didn't mislead Parliament.
Sajisa, that is actually
It's
incorrect.
Sangeeta, by the way.
I can go through them now. December the 18th.
No, please don't. But listen, you've made your point very eloquently, Claire. But yes, so listen, my final question to you is the issue of sanctions, right? This is where I have a real problem with it, because it would transpire that if he is found guilty of misleading Parliament, then if he is suspended for less than 10 days, he will just walk straight back in on the 10th or 11th day and carry on as usual. If he is suspended for more than 10 days, that might trigger a by-election. But in the end, any of these sanctions will have to be put before Parliament and MPs will vote for it. I think I know what the answer is, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What do you think should happen in relation to sanctions?
Do you know what? If he's found guilty, wrongly found guilty, it will in perpetuity it's going to restrict the ability of any MP to answer any question in the Commons from here on in. I mean...
yeah, bro, it's going to be so hard for MPs to lie in future. Oh, no. What are we going to do? What are you saying here, Claire? Are you saying that it's going to... The worst that could come of this, it's going to force MPs to be 100% truthful when they say things in Parliament? What a dystopian world do you envisage?
We have got to have the right thing done here. I've seen the evidence. The people will see the evidence on Wednesday. Boris did not mislead Parliament. We've been through it with a fine-tooth comb. It really is just a witch hunt from the left, from Labour. I mean, Can I ask?
If it's a witch hunt from the left and from Labour, then why is the majority of the committee involved in the privileges discussion on this? Why is the majority of it Conservatives? Literally, there are more court Conservatives on the panel than there are remainder of the parties combined. So how is it a witch hunt against him from the left if Conservatives are the ones doing the investigation? They literally cannot sanction him without at least two of these Conservative MPs agreeing that he should be.
Ask you something. If you believe it's such a witch hunt, if you believe you have evidence that he did not mislead Parliament, what are you scared of?
I'm
what
not
are you scared of?
I
Well,
want
you
him
are.
back
You
in
are
place
scared because
because I think
you're trying to
I
dissemble
think
this
Keir
the
Starmer is
parliament.
very scared.
Hang on a minute. You're trying to dissemble the committee by demanding that these 4 Tory MPs pull off it. So you are scared. Right? So what are you scared of? Because you keep saying over and over again in this interview that you've seen evidence that will clear Boris Johnson. Well, then let that evidence be put before the committee. And if you are right, he will be cleared. And if you are wrong, he will be found guilty of misleading Parliament.
I tell you what I'm scared of. I'm scared of socialism getting into number 10. I lived in Los
every single time, it's just, what's the problem? No, it's just socialism's the problem. What in McCarthy am I listening to? Well, literally, the Reform UK did a press conference yesterday where they said, the problem is that the Conservatives and Labour are just two sides of the same socialist coin. Like, the government have done things, and therefore it's never socialism. It's when the government does stuff. laws applying to MPs is literally socialism. The thing is, Conservatives continue doing this, right? They keep doing this. They keep saying anything that I don't like is socialism. So much so that they then get really wound up when they realise that loads of young people are socialists, because they keep saying, yeah, all these good things that you want, right? Whether they're socialist or not, they'll keep saying, oh, this is just socialism. And we're like, well, if that's socialism must be fucking based. I'm definitely a socialist now. Like, yeah, MPs being held to account for the things they do and say. If that's socialism, then call me a fucking socialist. Which I already am a socialist, but like, whatever. Oh dear. This is because she knows she'll be up against the wall come the revolution. In Minecraft, theoretically.
Los Angeles for the last 14 years before the pandemic. I've seen what happens when you allow socialists in the door.
What? The Socialist Democratic Party? Gavin Newsom, the famous socialist? What? Literally anything to the left of fucking Pinochet is socialism to these people, and they get exactly, and they are writing their own demise, right? They're writing their own kind of obituary here by making everybody think that socialism is good by comparing good things to socialism.
I want a Conservative government. I believe in this Conservative government, and I believe Boris is our true leader. And I do respect Rishi. Of course, I respect Rishi.
Okay, let's not talk about Rishi. This isn't about Rishi. Claire Bullivant, but good try, though. Claire Bullivant, editor of Conservative Post. I tell you, you must be the first person to ever come on this programme and called Andy Carter, Alberto Costa, Sir Charles Walker and Sir Bernard Jenkin socialists. Thank you very much indeed for your...
Sir Bernard Jenkin, the famous socialist. Well, that was an absolute laugh, right? Well, we'll look forward to tomorrow when we actually get to watch the Privileges Committee, because that's gonna be fucking hilarious. I look forward to that. And also, if you're enjoying the content, please like, comment, subscribe, engage with the algorithm, become a member for 99p future YouTube viewers, and current Twitch viewers, you can subscribe for $3.99 if you would like to. Never expected, but always appreciated. But the subscription and the like and the comment on the future YouTube segment, that is expected. Do now. Like the video, leave a comment now. Do it. I command you.